There are studies that show that perfectionism can negatively impact your self-esteem. And today on Two Buds, One Shroom, I'm going to talk to you about the two different types of perfectionism that existed in my life and how one of them began to rob my self-esteem and almost submarine Two Buds, One Shroom from even starting. Let's begin. So if you guys don't know me, I'm Tim, the owner and creator of Two Buds, One Shroom, and we're going to have guests on to talk about how they've overcome difficult periods in their life and kind of share how they did it and what worked for them and what didn't, what paradigm shifts kind of happened in their mentality. And before I have guests come on to our channel to share their stories and open up to the world, I think it's important to start with me because I want to be the first one that took the leap of faith on this project. And if you clicked on this video because of the word perfectionism, let me share with you one of my stories about what I went through regarding my own perfectionism. And hopefully you can get something out of it to apply to your own life. The story really starts with my dad, who is pretty much a brilliant guy. Since a young age, he had a mind for like fixing things and creating things. And he loved coming up with like creative ideas that solved problems, whether it's just in general or for people. And even though he worked for some big companies like Western Electric and AT&T for several years, he ultimately decided that that life wasn't for him. And especially with like the toxic work environment and the long hours that he had to contend with, that and family didn't really balance out. So he basically took his high ambitions and talents elsewhere and made his own business, or 2 or 5 or 10. Like, he made a lot of businesses, and not all of those businesses were successful, but damn did that motherfucker try. Like, his talents alone were all respectable. But so was the fact that along the way, he was able to keep his morals about him. Like, his core value was to do the right thing by people. And there'd be times where he'd even give money back to companies because he unintentionally overpriced his product. And he was, again, that was just my dad. But he just loved to help people, like solve problems, pitch ideas, and just do the right thing by people. And he made it look like owning a business was like fun and exciting. So I got to see that growing up, and I liked what I saw. He had a lot of flexibility to kind of work how he wanted to work and set the hours that he wanted to. And he taught hard work would reap big rewards. So when I graduated from college, I kind of inherited some of that entrepreneurial spirit. My sister got the other half. In fact, she probably got more than I did because she's like a marketing wizard and twice the go-getter that I am. So she got more than half. But she also inherited my dad's hard head. So we're going to have to just call that even. But, you know, what little entrepreneurial spirit I got from dad, I came out of school with it, and I thought I had a really good idea of how I wanted to serve people, how I wanted to be as a professional. And I was good at finance in school. I found it to be interesting. And I had my dad's knack for problem solving. So I figured, you know, why not to try to do right by people by giving them like good, solid advice about what they should do with their money. And I like the idea of developing relationships with people and being their go-to guy because I just enjoyed being helpful to people. Doing that made me feel good. So I got the idea that I wanted to become a financial advisor, which is not easy to do coming right out of college. Like, your network, it's just people that are just starting out their job and they don't have a lot of money themselves, right? And whether you're doing financial advisory the right way, which is actually doing planning, or you're doing it the wrong way, which is just pushing products at people, at the end of the day, both of those things are just sales. So like every entrepreneurial sales endeavor, it comes with virtually no salary, and there's a ton of risk with it because only 5% of the people that do that make it to the 5-year mark. But there's also like a lot of financial promise and upside to that. And I was sure as anything that all I had to do is just hang in there long enough, have integrity, and, you know, just make your best effort to give people good advice and treat people right, rather than having to twist arms to make sales. And eventually it would all pay off. And that worked out because I spent 15 years at doing that. But I'm going to tell you that not all of those 15 years were the same for me. Some of what I thought were my best traits ended up being things that ate me alive. And I viewed my keen attention to detail and ability to problem solve as like my two best strengths. And I put a lot of weight on those two strengths. Being a detailed person can sometimes have the problem that comes along with it called perfectionism. Now, not all perfectionism is bad. There's positive perfectionism, also known as healthy perfectionism, and that's pretty motivating to have because it's full of self-love and positive ambition, and it basically allows you to set realistic challenges and expectations for yourself so you can grow as a person, all while having the ability to not like overdo it or obsess. And then there's negative perfectionism, which is also known as unhealthy perfectionism, which can crush your soul. It's where you beat yourself up, you can get hyper concerned about making mistakes, you get concerned about looking bad, and it's just littered with shame and guilt. And you load yourself up with these unrealistic expectations, like expecting to be perfect or being the absolute best at something in a short period of time, or diving too deep on details and analyzing things to the point you overanalyze them, especially things that really ultimately like, don't really matter in the grand course of things. But before I tell you my story, which one of those things do you think that I had more of over the past 15 years? You may see a pretty happy guy here on the surface today, but what you don't pay attention to is the fact that you can have both negative and positive perfectionism working together inside you as kind of like push and pull. And what people don't see is the work that I have to do to curb that negative perfectionism, so the positive comes out ahead. So when I started my career, my perfectionism was all positive. It had the purest of intentions. Like I would let myself get wrapped up in the details because I was innately curious about learning, and just I was on the pursuit of becoming better so I can better serve people, and I could just become like a more knowledgeable person so I can serve people in more capacities. And when it was time to present solutions to people, like I really wanted to crush it and communicate it well and have for them to be like, wow, he really knows his shit. But when everything began to change was when I had my first real trauma in life. And it was from the death of someone that I really loved. And to say the least, it just knocked my spirit down a peg. I started to run into these like rolling moods, and they were mostly low. Like that's where they became more low moods than positive moods, right? Like high moods. But I also had like low energy and poor sleep quality beginning to creep in as well. And then I began to develop like a brain fog, and gray clouds were starting to kind of develop in my life. And when they rolled in, they stayed there. And the challenge with the brain fog was when I was doing the work in my job, it made the analysis and the meeting prep more difficult. And the low energy and the poor sleep made it tough to even like want to do the work. And the rolling moods that I was experiencing affected my confidence and my self-esteem. And it made me, when you feel low, you kind of compensate a little bit in somehow, some way. Not always are you able to keep track of like how you're compensating, but I was compensating a little bit more on those strengths that I had of knowing all the details and having, everything kind of figured out and plans more than normal. And the negative perfectionism that I had, it just became louder. High expectations that I had from the positive perfectionism were still there, but the negative perfectionism was just being more self-critical than I'd ever have been before. So it was constantly like, you could do better than that. You're just being lazy. You're not motivated. Like, why can't you do this work faster? And The positive perfectionism was still inside me, but the question was always like, could I scrounge up enough of it to where I can push the rock up the hill to get the work done at that point? And every time I could do that, the energy was a matter of question now. And I would pretty much just burn myself out. And I began to create this belief for how no matter what I was doing and no matter how much work I was putting into being able to sustain this positivity, I would always like cycle back to feeling low again. And that's dangerous because that's where hopelessness begins to set in. The work that used to challenge me to be better and, used to make me feel good became something that I just dreaded doing. And it was rooted in how my body was feeling, and that there were more low moods than there were like good uplifting moods. And it was how I made myself feel from the unchecked negative criticism that I had. And as a result, I just started procrastinating on doing that work. Like I knew that every time it was time to do that work, it was going to eat up hours and hours and hours of my time. What was already a large task became a gargantuan task in terms of just how it felt. And again, I was kind of compensating a little bit on the strengths that I had because I wasn't feeling as confident in front of people as I once was. And one of the ways I can offset that is really be on my game with knowing the details and being a step ahead and just how prepped I was for the meeting. When I would do the work, I'd be losing myself in these details and I'd not be able to fully focus because, again, the brain fog from just kind of the low mood and the brain fog in general that I was experiencing. And I would beat myself up for all these things I'd fall short on. And the next thing you know, I was anxious because I was just avoiding the task altogether. Like I would just push it out later and later until where I'm like, man, I've really got to do meeting prep. And then I would shift into it. And when I would do it, sometimes I'd put myself in a bit of a time crunch. And I was all out of balance because of all this. And here is the final blow to what remained with my confidence. The potential for a case not closing after doing all of that hard work. I took all that rejection personally, even though I know I shouldn't. I took all of it personally. Perfectionism is a double-edged sword where it can push you to be the best version of yourself, but if you're in the wrong headspace, it can make you feel like you're constantly falling short of who you want to be. And in a sales environment, your self-esteem and confidence are ultimately no match of being a negative perfectionist in a bad headspace. It'll wear you out, especially if you get distracted and forget to keep your eye on this balance of negative and positive perfectionism. So let me tell you about where I am now. I spent about 15 years going through just the way I felt. And a lot of those symptoms were like body symptoms from the vitamin D and magnesium deficiency that I did not know that I had, but also just the trauma that I went through from dealing with a loss and the sadness that comes along with that and the grieving process. And I didn't really have an outlet for that, but the negative perfectionism eating me up played a big part in a lot of this stuff. And those last 3 years of those 15, from when I had my dad go through his medical stuff from a surgery that went wrong and saw the health challenges that he had to go through, like a really good guy that didn't deserve any of that. That's what led to those final 3 years being an absolute low in my life. But now I've got 20 straight months of feeling great. Like my mood has been more stable than I've ever had it in my adult life. I'm clear-minded. I'm sharp again. My sleep is good. It could be better, but I'm working on it. And now, like right before I launched Two Buds, One Shroom, and before we put up our real like first video, I went through a bit of a rut that lasted about 2 months. But it wasn't the same depression or the same low mood cycle that plagued me the decade prior. This time it was different. And I didn't know what it was. I was in good spirits, but I just like felt off. Like I just wasn't, it was just different this time. And I didn't feel confident with the progress I was having getting this YouTube channel launched. And, I kind of just got in a funk. And I kept saying to my mom, I said, hey, I'm going through something, but it's just different. And I think that I'm going through it for a reason. I was trying to figure out what that reason was. And it was because I got stuck on a problem. I got hung up on the expectations I had for myself. And it was that negative perfectionism peeking its ugly head around again in my life. And it was a classic case of me wanting to be the absolute best at something in such a short period of time. And the question was, is my level of work that I'm going to put out there going to be up to people's standards and expectations? Like, would they think it was good? I got hung up on there being so much to learn about starting a YouTube channel and then like trying to be perfect at it. So there's like learning lighting, and then there's camera work, and then audio engineering and researching, which, I spend a lot of time researching supplements, treatments, medications, harm prevention stuff. And I've got a lot of that done, but oh my gosh, it's just time consuming. And there's so much that I don't know. And then there's online marketing, and I'm on social media quite a bit, creating awareness for mental health stuff and trying to help other people. But then there's video editing, which is a big bottleneck for me right now because I'm pretty bad at it, and I'm learning, but I'm bad at it. Then there's being on camera, watching yourself, like try to film this stuff, and then trying to edit that so you get to see yourself fail over and over again. And there's a lot of takes that go into this. Then there's reshoots when they're really bad. All of it can be extremely overwhelming, especially since I've never done anything like this before. So this little rut that I got myself in was like a 1v1, me facing my negative perfectionism. And it was just trying to twist my arm again and make me afraid of taking risk and putting myself out there. And it was making me afraid of practicing. And the fear of like gradual improvement rather than like instant perfection, right? Like those were just rubbing up against each other. And being afraid to interface with the possibility that, people may not like what I put out there, or I may not be accepted in what I'm saying or valued by literally anyone. One of the many things that I've learned over the past 20 months is that as forgiving as I am to other people, my negative perfectionism would never let me be forgiving of myself. And it made me have fear of taking a risk and putting myself out there. And there'd be self-sabotage and these unrealistic standards and goals and unfair comparisons that I'd make. Like all of that that's rooted in negative perfectionism is just bullshit. And once you have the depression and the anxiety and the low mood and all the other body symptoms that you may be experiencing off your back, it's easier to understand that that's bullshit. So if you're listening and you're not at that point today, that's okay. Let's talk about getting there. And that's where I hope that people plug into our project and begin to listen to the message of what has worked for people to get them there. So our listeners can begin to create that for themselves, that victory story, so to speak. So when you watch these videos, I hope you'll see beyond someone that's just trying to help other people. Like, I hope that you'll see a person who is making his best effort. And it's just me working to improve not only myself, but who I can be for people. I'm taking hacks the best I can daily to stomp out that negative perfectionism. And I'm doing good. And I'm letting the positive perfection like live and eat. And I want to feed that. And the passion I have for helping people and solving problems and being a resource, just like my dad, like I want to build a community of people that are hungry for that too. And getting the information and the perspective out there will outweigh all of my negative self-critique. So now that I got all that out there, I'm going to give you a worst case scenario here and then we're done. Ending on something negative now that we're talking about negativity, right? I want to see this project through to the end because not only is it becoming like a good passion project that I'm seeing the results of it. Like people are finding the project. I'm interacting with people. They're telling me good things and they're making good changes for themselves. Like this could change people for the good. And I really believe in that. And if the project were to ever fail, let's just say that I can't do this entrepreneurially anymore. I've got to pivot and find a career. Maybe I pivot back to the financial world. I could always look back on this and say that I started putting myself out there again. And that's been a good exercise for me. And yeah, I've met people throughout the project that are solid people, but it's helping them. I can say that. And then not only do I have videos that are going to be up in like permanent record on YouTube, but they're going to hopefully become a permanent resource for people for years to come. But I'm also hoping that people can say the same thing about me as I can say about my dad and some of his, struggles and failed entrepreneurial challenges that he had. Like, damn, at least that motherfucker tried. And if people can say that about me, like I'd be good with that. I'm hoping they can at least look at me and say, if Tim can do it, like I can do that too. I can overcome that negative perfectionism. And I can manage that. I can push back and fight back against that and begin to put myself back out there. And the name of the game is making small changes to dampen those symptoms that are causing that and creating that. And just dampen them enough to where you get enough positive perfectionism that outweighs that negative. And then you just push. And then you forgive yourself for when you fall short of that. So if you like what you heard today, hit that like and subscribe button and leave a comment down below because all that stuff helps promote our channel. And we've got a Patreon in case you guys want to financially support us. We have a Discord in case you want to pop in and see us and be a part of our community. We have a ton of resources on there, by the way. And as always, keep trying the best you can and keep paying good things forward. See you later.